Okay, so just so people know, this is a very specific part of the itinerary of the Byrne Supper, and it's called the Immortal Memory, as you can see from the program. And it's either done by the chairman or appointed speaker, and he's supposed to talk long enough to make sure that you know that you're not at the Christmas office party or something. It's supposed to be serious, but not too long where you start falling asleep and yawning and things like that. So I'm going to do my famous 500 years in 15 minutes. But I want to give people a really concrete sense of what we're talking about with this Britain Delenda S. What does this really mean? Because it's very specific historically, and we're right in the middle of it right now. And this is something why I put on the back of the program, the living memory of Mark Helmy. That's why Mark is smiling here, because he knows the end is nigh, right? The end is coming from the House of Windsor, from the British Empire. Now what I'm going to go through, and I'm going to just give you a big picture of what the historical context is of what Burns is born into and his life. What's going on, right? Most of what I'm going to be going through is in much more detail in this book that Mark wrote called Robert Burns and the Ideas of the American Revolution in 1996. And it was redone again in 2007. And for people that are interested, I could send you the PDF of the book. You can read the whole book. I definitely recommend it.
It is online.
Yes. And just for my little promo here, I have an American history website, and there's a whole page on Mark Helmy. And I've collected some of his works, because it wasn't just about Scotland or Britain that Mark worked on. We worked very closely on groundbreaking work on the role of the American patriots in creating Sun Yat-sen and a modern China. He did extraordinary work on exposing the brainwashing of Hollywood, of the American people. All of this you can read. I'll give people the URL or whatever if you want. But what I'm going to start with is this gentleman here, Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz. Now, I think the way to think of this is that the period that we're living in now is the era of Leibniz. I think that's the way to think about this. And that really is the last 300 years. And Leibniz had a very specific idea of creating a completely new form of society conducive to a higher state of humankind. And I'm just going to read something very briefly here he wrote when he was quite young called Society and Economy. And for those of you that saw our New Paradigm show this past week, Jason read this, part of this quote. But he had this conception. And remember, the world is generally, at this point, still a feudal world. You have a very small group of people that have a lot, and basically everybody else is a serf and a slave. And that is what it is, right? And his conception is to create a series of academies, centers of learning, which would be tied to a revolution in industry and science, which would be powered by heat-powered machines. And you can see what he says here. If you do this, the trading monopolies will be eliminated. The wealth of traders is much too great, and the misery of the workers is far too profound. Where the method of the merchants is to maintain the workers in a state of poverty and menial labor. Why must so many people be reduced to such poverty? For the sake of so few. The society will therefore have as its goal to liberate the worker from this misery. Now, there's much more that can be said about Leibniz, but this is concretely what he was out to do. And it was a global project that had its roots in something earlier, which many here are familiar with, which was initiated by this gentleman here, Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa, up on your left there. And it became clear to people around Cusa, and these were people around the Italian Renaissance, that you could not achieve this kind of society in Europe because of the rule of empire and the aristocratic class, etc. It couldn't be done. And they came up with an idea and even had the map for it, which Columbus got a hold of, to bring this project here. A completely fresh new continent to create this. Now, back to Leibniz. All right? Leibniz's conception was not just limited to, he's German or even French, etc. He had a global idea. And he had operations to set up these kind of academies all over the world. This is Peter the Great in Russia. Leibniz collaborated with him. Peter the Great basically took a nothing, an empty fort, and created a completely new city, which is today, of course, St. Petersburg, and set up one of these academies along with Leibniz. And this became the germ of what the great Russian science tradition that we actually know today. In France, Leibniz worked with the people around the École Polytechnique, this kind of academy. This is Denis Papin. And can people see what he's holding here? Anybody know what that is? What?
Steam engine.
Yes. Oh, you're right. Inside. Shill, yeah. Yeah, this is 100 years before Robert Fulton and the steam engine. Right? And that was the project that he was involved in directly with Leibniz. And then Leibniz had this idea of a great dialogue of cultures, that you could unite the extreme end of civilization in Europe with the great old civilization in China. He was in touch with Confucian scholars directly through missionaries in China. He devoted a large part of the last part of his life to this. And then last but not least, England. Right? And this is Queen Anne, who ends up being the last of the Stuart monarchs. In fact, the last English monarch. And Leibniz had a conspiracy to create a group of people around her. Right? Why? Because they're going to make England the center of this? No. No, to free up any kind of opposition so that the American colonies can further develop this idea of Leibniz's. That's the idea. And make it for the whole continent, coast to coast, Atlantic to Pacific. Now, this is fun. So who are some of Leibniz's key collaborators in America to do this? Remember, this is way before the American Revolution. You have Alexander Spotswood. Now, Spotswood was a direct descendant of Robert II, King of Scotland. And he is an extraordinary guy. And we don't have any time to go through all of it, but one of the things that he did is work directly with the Leibniz people, a guy by the name of Jacob Lederer, who actually created a map that showed how you could reach the Appalachians chain and get into the interior to expand this project westward. He also defeated, by the way, Blackbeard, but they don't put that in the Disney movies. Right? You should be in those movies, but they, it's fiction. Robert Hunter, also from Scotland. He was the governor of New York. Again, we don't have time to go through details. And then this is just a little New Jerseyana. Lewis Morris was a key collaborator of Leibniz here in New Jersey, and at a very young age worked with Andrew Hamilton, who was from
New Jersey.
Scotland.
Oh.
Later New Jersey. He was a lawyer. He was the governor, colonial governor of what was called East-West Jersey. And these guys collaborated to create a one state, one colony of New Jersey. And that's why we have a state of New Jersey and not East Jersey and a West Jersey. How do you like that? It's a Scottish conspiracy. Now, you have, of course, as this thing begins to grow, a totally evil opposition. And this is a group of people who literally model all of their thinking on the old Venetian slave empire. They called themselves the Venetian Party. This is Walpole, who was the Prime Minister of England throughout this entire period. And what this picture is some version of what they called the Hellfire Club. Anybody ever heard of that, the Hellfire Club? This is part of the initiation. If you want to get on the inside, you had to go to these parties. And what did they do? You don't want to know.
That's what they do today.
Yeah, it's what they do today, right. They like that. Yeah. So they moved upon, especially the death of Queen Anne. And if you look at the back of your program, see the little thing here? It says Burns on seeing the royal castle at Stirling in ruins. The injured Stuart line is gone. A race outlandish fills the throne. An idiot race to honor lost. Who know them best despise them most. And the idiot race were the idiots. Literally. And it's a race of idiots, of complete morons, retards. Right? And that's the House of Hanover. This is George I.
They're not even English.
They're not even English. Right? And this is the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha line. That's, one of the best representatives of the idiot race. And this is what happened. What happened is that the end of the English monarch occurred in 1715, right? 14, actually a bit earlier. But Queen Anne dies in 1714. Leibniz dies in 1716, right? And this Venetian Party idiot race And I think they've been around so long, people say, oh, England, oh God, yeah, House of... Oh, that's garbage. This is the idiot race that usurped power in 1714, and that's all there is to it. And they're about to meet their demise. All right? So you really... So just to get back to some of the history, this is the Battle of Cullidan. Is anybody familiar with this?
Culloden.
How do you say it?
Culloden.
Culloden. Okay, boy, glad you're here. Anyway, this was a rebellion by really the Scottish nobility that wanted to take back the throne from the Hanoverian race of idiots. I'll show you where this is in a second, where this occurred. They lost, obviously. All right, so after Leibniz dies, the Venetian Party takes over. There's really one guy that picks up the whole fight, and that's this young man here, Benjamin Franklin. And interestingly enough, people know what he did here in terms of establishing the post offices and the scientific work, the lightning rod, etc. But in order to be, what he chose as a fulcrum to renew this whole project of Leibniz was not here, but it was in England. Right? And who did he work with in England to do this? And really, it's like an Apollo program. The idea is you get the best minds together and you set up the most advanced form of industrial production using steam power, heat-powered engines in iron making, textiles, etc. So the one person he collaborates with is Dr. William Small from Scotland, all right, who had gone back to the colonies. I think in the 40s or 50s, 1740s or 50s. He was a physician. He was also a musician. He used to play string quartets with Thomas Jefferson and people like that. So Franklin brought him back to England. The other guy is Bolton, who was an Englishman, and then James Watt. Everybody recognize that last name, right? James Watt. Okay. And James Watt. Boy, I wish I could tell more about. Anyway, you can see the little. See what that is? It's also a steam engine, yeah. So he basically put his mind to work to perfect this whole process.
Steam engine.
It's a steam engine. It's designed for a steam engine. And they chose a place in England to do this. By the way, there's a whole chapter on this in Mark's book, so you can read all the details. Right? So by 1759, beginning of 1759, or actually, in the fall, Franklin is given an award, an honorarium by St. Andrews University. And St. Andrews University is, of course, known as the first university of Scotland. And there, as students, is this gentleman on the left here, James Wilson. Everybody know who he is? You know who he is.
Diane's great-grandfather.
Yeah, right.
Great.
He was the recording secretary of the Constitutional Convention. And he wasn't just a recording secretary. He was key in actually drafting the Constitution of the United States. He was a student at St. Andrews. And the other one was this fellow, David Erskine, the Earl of Buchan. Is that he just? You know what I'm talking about.
No, I can't tell you.
And he was attending university there when Franklin visited Scotland in 1759 and into 1760. And he had suffered an injury. And he accredited Franklin's advice with saving his life. Because Franklin, of course, knew modern medicine, etc., from a scientific standpoint. Whoops. Okay, so a few months before that occurred in St. Andrews, Robert Burns was born. All right, and so he's born into this fierce battle, and this is important, and he's quite sensitive to it. This is just for people that don't know Scotland. You have the Shetland Islands, Isles of Orkney, the Hebrides. This is, of course, the Highlands. That's Inverness. That Battle of, how did you say again? Culloden. That's right up here near Inverness. And also Cawdor, right? The Thane of Cawdor. Then you have the mountains, then you have what's called the central lowlands, which is agriculture, and it's a rift valley. It's a tremendous amount of raw materials, and that's what we're going to look at, because that's where Burns is from. Just briefly. So that's this area. And you can see it's super, super small, right? This is like Connecticut and Massachusetts. So this is not some huge area, right? So he's born in Alloway. He lives in Tarbolton, Moshlin. I don't know how to pronounce these names.
Marshland's correct.
And then you see Edinburgh's up there, Glasgow's here. They're only about 50 miles apart. And his last place of residence is Dumfries, which is where that picture is of Mark in front of his house. That's the house that he was born in. And you can see this is there where he was born into a farming family, right? And you know, pretty poverty stricken. Now, one thing that he got wrapped up in quite early, in like 1780, 81, is this whole Franklin project in the form of an advanced textile operation that had been set up in Irvine with the latest of using the steam machine, the steam engines, etc. And he went there for a couple of years and learned skills. This is the first volume of poems that he was published in 1786, right? Called the Kill, as you can see, the Kilmarnock.
Kilmarnock.
What?
Kilmarnock.
Yeah, see? I don't know any Scottish at all. But now here's the thing. This is just great. So at a certain point, you know, and you've heard some of the poems and stuff, so I'm not going to go through that. That's the best way to get to know Burns. But at a certain point, he actually is offered a position to go to Jamaica to be an overseer or whatever of a slave plantation. It's like completely ridiculous. And he's thinking of going, and it's probably just because of money. They're extremely poor. And you got a couple interventions. This guy, Thomas Blacklock, was a collaborator of Franklin, was a poet from Edinburgh, got a hold of the original edition of the poems, and contacted Burns and said, don't go to Jamaica. Come to Edinburgh. You're the national poet. Get to Edinburgh. The other person that did the same thing was this guy, Erskine, who was the one that accredited Franklin with saving his life, who basically intervened and did the same, said, look, go to Edinburgh. And this was a conspiracy to put Burns right in the center of the elite of Scotland, and that's exactly what they did. They even got Henry Mackenzie, who was a novelist and a Tory. This is not somebody that was politically a revolutionary or anything else, but to recognize the genius of Burns and endorse him publicly in the press in Scotland, and that, in Edinburgh, and that made him a national figure. This is a painting of Burns being inducted into the Freemasonic Lodge in Edinburgh. And here's a painting of Burns with the elite. That's Blacklock here. And this is one of these paintings where each one of these people is a real person, and there's a key, and you can look up who they all are and all that kind of stuff. So this results in the second edition, the Edinburgh edition of his poems, which is 1787. And I'm going to see how quickly that was. Look at that. We're at the end already. So this is what's on the cover here. And I'm just going to read the first lines from this poem, Ode for General Washington's Birthday. But you get the idea of the passion. No Spartan tube, no attic shell, no lyre aeolian I awake. 'Tis liberty's bold note I swell. Thy harp, Columbia, let me take. See gathering thousands while I sing, a broken chain exulting bring, and dash it in a tyrant's face, and dare him to his very beard, and tell him he no more is feared, no more the despot of Columbia's race. And it goes on. This was written for George Washington's birthday, right? We should do, on George Washington's birthday, we should read the whole poem. Anyway, that's what that is. And then, so I want to end with this because I want people to think about this. Because we are at a point in history where this entire idiot race is going to come to an end, one way or the other, right? And of course, the solution is right there on the table with what we've already organized with the Worldwide Land Bridge, the BRICS Alliance countries, this dream of Leibniz, right? And I put this here, our 2 concerts in New York and Manhattan, because look, we should think about this. We should think of this supper here as being the beginning of a complete renaissance of the English language. I never knew Burns before, but I've been able to read through some of the poems, and it's there. It's there along with, a revival we could do of, Handel, obviously, the Messiah is in English, and other things. I know this is something that John Segerson has in mind also. And that's really where we can go with this. Because we've had this idiot race kind of, it's like a sewer cover on our heads. Yeah, right? The English speaking world. And that can be blown up. And Mark would really love that. And so with that, we have a toast. Our first toast. The immortal memory of the Bard of Air, Robbie Burns.
Don't forget Robbie. Come on. I'm taking the best of the next one.
I'll add one thing out of all of this that I think, maybe I don't have the floor. Okay. One small announcement, but I think it's actually very important. When Mark did his book, I don't think he actually knew this, and he knew this later on, that what Robert Burns thought was the most important of anything that he did, forget the 500 poems. He thought the music and the saving the Scottish folk songs was the most important out of anything he was doing. And I think that's appropriate for today and what we're doing in Manhattan.
Move it fast now, okay?
Bob, you got the lyrics? Hold on a second.
We're going to have some lyrics on the screen here in a second. One thing Bob didn't touch on too much was something else that Robbie Burns is known for, which is that he was very fond of the lassies. But what you'll see in this next song is that there's a richness to it. He's counterposing it to what some other people are fond of, like material wealth and royalty and rank and all these things. So I'm going to sing here something called "Green Grow the Rashes." And we're going to have, I just wanted to go to a couple things on the lyrics so that you understand it. There's some Scottish words that you might not understand. In one of the verses he says, "But give me a canny hour at even," which is give me a quiet hour at evening with my lassie. And then in a subsequent verse he says, "For you say douce, you sneer at this." Say means so, and douce means like sober or proper. So these are some of the words.
You're gonna have to fill it.
Why don't I just sing?
Yeah, just
Why don't I
sing.
just sing?
Just sing. Go ahead.
There's naught but care on every hand, in every hour that passes o'er. What signifies the life of man, and 'twere not for the lasses o'er. Green grow the rashes o'er, green grow the rashes o'er. The sweetest hours that e'er I spent are spent among the lasses o'er. The wildly race may riches chase, and riches still may fly them all. And though at last they catch them fast, their hearts can ne'er enjoy them all. Green grow the rushes all, green grow the rushes all, the sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses all. But give me a canny routine, my arms about my dearie o, and worldly cares and worldly men may all get topsel-terrio. Green grow the rushes all, green grow the rushes all, the sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses all. For you say douce, ye sneer at this, you're na but senseless asses all. The wisest man the world e'er saw, he dearly loved the lasses all. Green grow the rushes all, green grow the rushes all, the sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses all. Old nature swears the lovely dear, her noblest work she classes all. Her prentice hand she tried on man, then she made the lasses all. Green grow the rushes all, green grow the rushes all, the sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses all.
Can you lift the glasses while I do this? No. Well, this is a toast to the president. Or better, more to the hot point. Let us render the current illegitimate president toast. And let us restore the presidency. Let us begin by toasting the founders of the institution. As our bard wrote, and Bob just referenced this, as our bard wrote in his ode for General Washington's birthday, during our first presidential term, "'Tis liberty's bold note I swell, thy harp, Columbia, let me take. See gathering thousands while I sing, a broken chain exulting bring, and dash it in a tyrant's face, and dare him to his very beard, and tell him he no more is feared, no more the despot of Columbia's race. A tyrant's proudest insult braved, they shout, a people freed. But come, ye sons of liberty, Columbia's offspring, brave as free. In danger's hour, still flaming in the van, ye know and dare maintain the royalty of man." People should read the whole poem. Yes. As our Manhattan hero, our founder, Publius, in Federalist number 70, polemicized, "The genius of Republican government demands an energetic executive. The ingredients which constitute energy are unity, duration, an adequate provision for its support, competent powers. The ingredients which constitute safety, as from despotism, in a Republican sense, are a due dependence on the people, a due responsibility. Let our people rise from their plunge into despondency and despair, as if with New York's FDR, now behind our Manhattan Project hero. Let us restore the Promethean presidency by crushing the agents of perfidious Albion, the Aaron Burrs, who murdered Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, Kennedy, and imposed upon us in this new century Bush and Obama. Let the Republican razor-sharp wit of our Burns burn the Bushes forever and create havoc and despair among our Democratic fakers and traitors. One might say, let them feel the burn of Burns. Or, instead of a plague on both their houses, a Scottish plaid. Plaid? Okay. On both your houses as we burn their British asses. So on this most auspicious celebration, let us toast the Hamiltonian presidency being recreated by LaRouche and on to the victorious fun.
Here.
Yes.
That was great. That was great.
Do you have this on the thing? We need to move along, please.
Taya louse on seeing one on a lady's bonnet at church. Ha! Where you going, you crowling fairly? Your impudence protects you sorely. I cannot say you strong, but rarely o'er gauze and lace. Though I fear ye dine but sparely in sic a place. Ye ugly, creeping, blasted oner, detested, shunned by saint and sinner, how dare ye set your fit upon her? Say fine a lady. Go somewhere else and seek your dinner on some poor body. Swift, in some beggar's hatchet squattle, there ye may creep and crawl and sprattle wi' ither kintle, jumping cattle in shoals and nations, where neither horn nor bane dare unsettle your thick plantations. Now had you there, you're out of sight, beneath the fat rolls snug and tight. Nah, faith, you'll nae be right till you're sorry. Now had you there, you're out of sight below the fat rolls, snug and tight. Nah, faith ye yet, you'll no be right till you've got on it the very topmost height o' Mrs. Bonnet. Right bald you set your nose out, as plump and grey as any grosset. Oh, for some rank mercurial roset, or fell red smedum, I'd gie sic a docet, would dress you dradum. I wouldn't have been surprised to see you on some old wife's flannin toy, or Ablin's some bit duddy boy on swiley coat. But Mrs. Fine Lunardi, how dare he do it? Oh, Jenny, dinna toss your head and set your beauties all abread. Ye little ken what cursed speed the blast is making. The winks and finger ends are notice taken. Ah, what some power the gift he gives to see ourselves as others see us. It would frae mony a blunder free us and foolish notion. What airs in dress and gait would lead us, and even devotion.
Well, that's a very hard act to follow. But I bring greetings from France. And Jacques Cheminade.
Are you going to read
in
it in
particular.
French?
No. Greetings for all of you, and to the memory of all our ancestors who committed their lives to the service of a higher humanity. Among them, Robert and Mark. What comes to my mind is a visit to the Museum of the Ould Alliance at the French city of Aubigny-sur-Ner, where there is a list of those who fought for such a French-Scottish alliance against a degenerated British power. And at the end of the list, somebody has added with pen the name of Diana Spencer. This sense of what is at issue in history as a continuity is one more sign of hope for our future among the tragic challenges of our present time. To think and act beyond our limits is the best gift we can give for those who did the same in the past. Most of you don't know us in France, but our common fight makes us brothers, closer than most people who do know themselves are. And there's a hand, my trusty frere, there are our hands. Jacques Cheminade.
Get some help.
So while I was getting ready to give this toast, this is maybe 45 minutes ago, I was in the hallway, and and Marion Black came up to me and she said, "Oh, I'm glad they chose you to give the toast, because since you're a newlywed, you're sure not to say anything bad about women." So she's implying that I'm afraid of my wife. Now, look at my wife. My wife is about 5 feet tall, and she's literally 1/2 the size of me.
Yeah, but it's not
Now
the
you
size.
I'm terrified of her.
Everybody see that about
So, but you know, have you heard what Robbie Burns had to say about marriage? He was not much older than me when he wrote to his friend, his name I forget. He said, who was recently married? And Robbie said, now remember, Robbie, he had, I believe that by his wife Jean, he had 10 children in 9 years. And
Like you threw others.
he really loved the lassies. And he said to his younger friend, he said, how do you like, I mean, how do you really like the married life? My friend, matrimony is quite a different thing from what your lovesick youths and sighing girls take it to be. But marriage, we are told, is appointed by God, and I shall never quarrel with any of his institutions. So something about this thing between laddies and lassies is appointed by God, and so we should go along with it. But some would tend to doubt God's judgment when you look at the representations of the lassies that we have around us today. Namely, Samantha Power, Susan Rice, Michelle Obama, Victoria Newland. How about the popular types, the Beyonce, Valerie Jarrett. Okay, and how about Elizabeth? So
We should toast the president, who is run by him.
yeah. But what, does anyone know what Robbie Burns says the rights of women are?
No.
There are, according to a poem that he writes, there are 3 rights of women. Any guesses? Thank you, Diane. Okay, so there's decorum, adoration, and protection. Namely, that women have the right to decorum. They have a right, they shouldn't have some offensive man running around and bothering them. They have the right to adoration. Women are the fairer sex and they deserve to be adored, says Robbie. And they have the right to protection. But none of these women that we named have any rights to that stuff. So this is rather difficult. But I mean, you think about protection, right? Right to protection sounds like R2P to me. Sounds like something to do with Libya to me. All right, but and yet, remember who women are. Remember who the lassies are. My brave men with me, my kilted fellows. You have the case of Vituria and Volumnia, the mother and the wife of Coriolanus, who bravely interceded to prevent him from destroying Rome. Those were some real women. Or Jeanne d'Arc, or Marie Curie, or my wife. Historic women, all of them.
Just in time.
And the list is long of historic women and their contributions to mankind. So I give them all their due, and so did Robbie. People know this wonderful piece, section of a poem. He says, "Health to the sex, ilk good child says, we merry dance in winter days, and we to share in common. The gust of joy, the balm of woe, the soul of life, the heaven below, is rapture-giving woman. Ye surly sumps who hate the name, be mindful of your mother. She, honest woman, may think shame that you're connected with her. You're way men, you're nay men, that slight the lovely dears. To shame ye, disclaim ye, ilk honest Berkey swears, excuse me. Ilk honest Berkey swears." So, I think that Bob mentioned in his lecture about the history that there was this guy Blackrock who intervened, and it has a lot to do with Robbie Burns and the Lassies, because basically Robbie, he got into some trouble where he was 25, He's 25 when he wrote the piece that Scott sang, and he was 25, and he had come together with a woman who was 17, and they had a child. But then the parents of his beloved, who he was prepared to marry, he was ready to go. The contract was signed, but her parents whisked her away and said, "I don't know about this Robbie Burns character. We're gonna take her away and do something else with her." And so he ended up meeting Highland Mary, who he writes about, who is a remarkable lassie, and he falls in love with her. And now I'm not totally an expert on this, so I don't know exactly the timeline, but there's a horrible tragedy where Mary dies in childbirth, and Robbie is prepared to move to Jamaica to escape all of his worldly cares and to escape this horrible personal situation where his first love has been essentially taken from him and his second love has been taken from him in a different way. And at that moment, Blacklock intervenes, happens to write to Robbie Burns and say, you're gonna this piece of poetry, this book of poetry you put together is going to be a huge success. So come on out, and Bob described the whole situation. So this is interesting because somehow the laddie saves Robbie from the lassies, and we have Robbie Burns because despite this near tragedy in his life, he actually says that the reason I came to poetry was because I fell in love, and that it was because of love that he came to words and verses and so forth. So let's agree to keep this toast of mine short, not because I want to rob you of the enjoyments of the male intellect. That's an unfortunate side effect. Rather because I agree with the sentiments of Burns' contemporary, Schiller, who was connected through Blacklock. Because Blacklock was connected to Mackenzie. Mackenzie was the one who introduced Schiller's work into Scotland. And Schiller, and I quote from the great Helga Zeppler-Rouche, she says that she refers to his discussions on the female sex and the male sex. She says, the male sex, he claims, puts up with an insult to his taste as long as the inner content of a matter satisfies his mind. Men enjoy a matter all the more if the essence of it emerges firmly, separated from the outer appearance. But the female doesn't forgive the neglected appearance, even if the content is rich. She demands that the form in which that content appears correspond to that richness. If the outward appearance does not fulfill the requirements of the aesthetical sensation, or even insults it, she will reject it. So, as a proud member of the male half of this race, I refuse to give a pretty speech. Let's get straight to the matter. Let's get right to the heart of it. Let's spit it out. Speak plainly. All of this praise of the lassies makes something abundantly clear. We need a new Robbie Burns, but it's entirely up to the women to create him. They're going to have to give birth to him, and they're going to have to inspire him with love. And so, let's toast to the lassies. All right. To the lassies.
Marnie? You want Margaret Knight first? Or? Okay, all right, Margaret's. Margaret.
Oh, let me get
What is this? What can a young lassie? This is just the opening of, Marnie is giving the reply to the laddies, but has asked us to begin it with a song. So she picked two of the youngest lassies. What can a young lassie do with an old man?
Is that too loud?
No, it's fun. What can a young lassie, what shall a young lassie, what can a young lassie do with an old man? What can a young lassie, what shall a young lassie, what can a young lassie do with an old man? And if the fairy that tempted my Minnie, and sell her for Jenny, for Schiller and Lan, bad luck on the penny that tempted my Minnie to sell her poor Jenny for Schiller and Lan. He's always complaining frae morning to evening. He blows and he hirples the weary day lang. He's always complaining frae morning to evening. He hosts and he hirples the weary day lang. He's dolt and he's dozing, his blood is frozen. Oh, drear is the night with a crazy old man. He's dolt and he's dozing, his blood it is frozen. Oh, drear is the night with a crazy old man. He hums and he hankers, he frets and he cankers. I never can please him to do all that I can. He hums and he hankers, he frets and he cankers. I never can please him do all that I can. He's peevish and jealous, so all the young fellows who duel on the day I met we an old man. He's peevish and jealous, so all the young fellows who duel on the day I met we an old man.
I don't know what you can say after that. My notes say, thank Daniel and thank Lainey for asking Daniel to make the toast. But I want to tell you, I was thinking about, whatever. Anyway, I was thinking about this, and Daniel and I had a phone call with a lovely Scottish gentleman the other day. And he is a lovely retired gentleman. He's a Scottish Presbyterian. He said he was raised that you're allowed to vote for anyone as long as they're Republican and go to any church as long as it's Presbyterian. And so we had this discussion. He was he has health issues in his family. Anyway, at the end he said, I have a question. I said, okay. He said, no, for the newlywed, because Daniel and I were both on the phone. And so Daniel says, okay. And he goes, have you won an argument yet? That really was funny. I mean, Daniel, we were ready for, why are you supporting, whatever. And he goes, have you won an argument yet? And then he told stories about how he and his friend both married women from French Canada. And they both basically gave up on trying to win arguments early on. See, Jessica thinks that's funny. She married French.
He said his book is sealed.
He had some color. Anyway, before I say anything, I want to say I have a debt to my mother. My mother was a Scottish-American lassie, and she did break the code on dealing with overbearing, arrogant, opinionated, fragile men, because we were raised, my father is an Irish-American, and we were raised believing we were Irish. We didn't even know we were Scots-Irish. And you might have thought if we were bright enough, we would have figured it out by the time we were like 10, but we didn't. And so, anyway, so this is for my mom, my late mom. Anyway, there's a lot to say about men. Really? But I'll be brief. And I am going to quote from Robbie Burns. He said, and as I look out here, this is really true. He said, there was indeed, in far less polished days, a time when rough, rude men had naughty ways, would swagger, swear, get drunk, kick up a riot, nay, even thus invade a lady's quiet. Now, thank our stars, those Gothic times are fled. Now, well-bred men, and ye are all well-bred. Anyway, I just wanted to briefly say, and then we're going to have a song for the laddies from a bunch of the lassies, is that it has been said that you can't live with them, you can't live without them. Now, I believe firmly that you can live with them. But you have to know how to deal with them. And the first thing is never, ever, ever directly confront them. They are fragile people. And so, like, let's say you're in a car and you're driving to Canada. And you pass a sign that says, "Welcome to Delaware." You don't, take notes on this, those of you who are young. You don't say, "Holy crap!" You have to say, "God, I love Delaware. We're going to get a chance to see it." Now, let me just ask you something. Do you think this is the absolutely shortest route? Or are you just doing this to make me happy to see it? Can you imagine how many marriages have been saved by the creation of GPS? Has anyone here ever been in a car with a guy driving for like an hour and a half in circles and they won't stop and ask for directions? You have? Yes, I'm sure, yeah. Anyway, but again, I don't want to go on and on. I'll just mention, we could be here all night, but I just want to mention one other thing, and then we're going to, which is, again, you just have to know how to deal with them. They're fragile. You know, hundreds of years before Pasteur discovered how, germs, how germs work, did you ever notice in the old movies, the minute the woman goes into, the water breaks, she's about to have a baby, they turn to the presumed father and say, "Go boil some water." Let's go boil some water.
To make tea.
No, it's like, go count the leaves of grass. This is an emergency. The main thing is that childbirth is not a pretty thing, and you do not want the presumed father to go. You don't know what the effect it will have on family formation and all kinds of things.
Yeah, my husband fainted during childbirth.
Thank you for mentioning that because that is very common. That's why you send them to boiled water. In fact, I had an idea that if China really wanted a one-child policy, they should have had the men in the delivery room. Or even better, they should have talked to God about having men give birth. Then we'd be down to like a 0-child policy. Anyway, we're going to sing a song, and those who are going to sing it.
Do you have copies?
No, I don't.
Oh, Nancy, that's okay.
Oh. Yeah.
I got one more.
This is another take on the question of the joys of marriage.
Okay. When I was single, I wore a plaid shawl. Now that I'm married, I've nothing at all. But still, I love him. I'll forgive him. I'll go with him wherever he goes. He gave me a handkerchief, red, white, and blue. But before I could use it, he tore it in two. But still, I love him. I'll forgive him. I'll go with him wherever he goes. He borrowed some money to buy me a ring. Then he and the jeweler went off on a fling. But still I love him. I'll forgive him. I'll go with him wherever he goes. There's cake in the oven and cheese on the shelf. If you want any more, you can sing it yourself. But still I love him. I'll forgive him. I'll go with him wherever he goes.
A toast to the laddies, each and every one. Yeah, to the laddies. Come on, let's go. Let's see some spirit in that.
Just for I know some people here don't know this gentleman who Lynn Speed is going to read a toast from. But in 18, this is a freedom fighter who escaped slavery and took on a huge fight in his entire life. And in 1849, in Rochester, upstate New York, where he had earlier formed a newspaper called the North Star, he was invited to an anniversary, a Burns anniversary, the 25th of January, the actual birthday of Burns, in 1849. And there was 300 people in the room, and most of them were Scottish. I think 2/3 of them are Scottish. And he gives this toast.
I also just wanted to add that Douglas himself, and I actually didn't realize this, went to Scotland on 3 different occasions, speaking, at least 3, it may have been 4, speaking very widely. And he also, like his good friend and fellow really poetic orator, Abraham Lincoln, was a great, great lover of Robbie Burns. I regard it as a pleasure, not less than a privilege, to mingle my humble voice with the festivities of this occasion. Although I am not a Scotchman, nor the son of a Scotchman, perhaps you will say, it needs no ghost to tell us that. But if a warm love of Scotch character and a high appreciation of Scotch genius constitute any of the qualities of a true Scotch heart, then indeed does a Scotch heart throb beneath these ribs. From my earliest acquaintance with Scotland, I have held that country in the highest admiration. As I traveled through the land 2 years since and became acquainted with its people and realized their warmth of heart, steadiness of purpose, and learned that every stream, hill, glen, and valley has been rendered classic by heroic deeds in behalf of freedom, that admiration was increased. That you may know that I have some appreciation of the genius of the bard whose birthday you have met to celebrate. I went on a pilgrimage to see the cottage in which he was born, and had the pleasure of seeing and conversing with a sister of the noble poet to whose memory we have met to do honor. I can truly say that it was one of the most gratifying visits I made during my stay in Scotland. I saw, or thought I saw, some lingering sparks in the eyes of this sister. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is not the time for long speeches. I do not wish to detain you from the social pleasures that await you. I repeat again that though I am not a Scotchman and have colored skin, I am proud to be among you this evening. And if you think me out of place on this occasion, I beg that the blame may be laid at the door of him who taught me a man's a man for all that.
You got the lyrics of the day? Great.
Scott, are you going to come up and do it?
Sure.
This needs no introduction.
The sweetest lad was Jamie, the sweetest, the dearest, and well did Jamie love me, and not a fault had he. Yet when he had it spoke his praise, he knew not woman's wish to tease, he knew not of our silly ways. Alas, the woe to me. For though I loved my Jamie sincerely and dearly, yet often when he wooed me, I held my head on high, and huffed and tossed with saucy air, and danced with Donald at the fair, and put his ribbon in my hair, and Jamie passed him by. So when the war pipe sounded, dear Jamie he left me, and now some other maiden will Jamie turn to. My heart will break and wait me, for who would word of pity say to her who threw a heart away, so faithful and so true? Oh, knew he how I loved him sincerely and dearly, how I would fly to meet him. Oh, happy were the
Bobby Burns poems. This one, the poem on sensibility. Sensibility, how charming thou, my friend, canst truly tell, but distress, with horrors arming, thou at last hast known too well. Fairest flower, behold the lily blooming in the summer rays. Let the blast sweep o'er the valley, see it prostrate in the clay. Hear the woodlark charm the forest, telling o'er his little joys. But alas, a prey the surest to each pirate of the skies. Dearly bought, the hidden treasure, finer feelings can bestow. Chords that vibrate sweetest pleasure, thrill the deepest notes of woe.
I'm very happy to hear to commemorate the born. I think I should give my sons to Lily, give my this opportunity to commemorate his born, and I found American people is very friendly. Yes, really. I love you, everyone. Okay. Welcome to China. I host you.
Yes.
Wow.
Scottish mother taught me when we took a road trip together to Western Canada. So for 4,000 miles, we sang "Ye banks and ye braes of Bonnie Doon." Okay.
Ye banks and braes of Bonnie Doon, how can ye bloom so fresh and fair? How can ye chant ye little birds that I say weary folk? You break my heart, ye birds that wantons on the flowery thorn. Ye mind be old forgotten joys, departed never to return. Oft hay I roamed by Bonnie Doon to watch the rose and woodbine twine, and Ilka bird sang, "Oh, it's love," and fondly say, "Did I, oh my." With lights of rose, full sweet upon its thorny tree. But my false love stole my rose, and he left the
I was looking at various Robbie Burns poems, and this one spoke to me.
What are you going to do about it?
We've been having We've been having a little difficulty with mice at our office, and given the time of year, I must admit I've had second thoughts about having to turn them out. This is a poem that Robbie Burns wrote called "To a Mouse on Turning Her Up in Her Nest with the Plow." And as has been mentioned, Robbie Burns was a farmer, and I have read, whether it's true or not, that his brother said that as he was plowing the field and did turn up the mouse, he stopped right there and wrote the poem. "Wee sleekit, cowering, timorous beastie, oh, what a panic's in thy breastie. Thou needna start the way so hasty with bickering brattle. I would be loath to rin and chase thee with murder and pattle. I'm truly sorry man's dominion has broken nature's social union, and justifies that ill opinion which makes thee startle at me, thy poor earth-born companion and fellow mortal. I doubt nae whiles, but thou may thieve. What then? Poor beastie, thou maun leave. A daemon icker in a thrave's a sma request. I'll get a blessin' with the lave and never miss it. Thy wee bit housey too in ruin. Its silly walls the winds are strewin', and nothin' now to big a new one. O foggage green, and bleak December's winds ensuin', baith snell and keen. Thou saw the fields laid bare and waste, and weary winter comin' fast. Oh, and cozy here beneath the blast thou thought to dwell, till crash, the cruel coulter passed out thro' thy cell. That wee bit heap o' leaves and stibble has cost thee money a weary nibble. Now thou's turned out for thy trouble, but house or held, to thole the winter's sleety dribble and cranroith caught. But mousie, thou art know thy lane, in proving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes of mice and men gang aft agly, and lee us naught but grief and pain for promised joy. Still, thou art blessed compared with me. The present only toucheth thee, but och, I backward cast my eye on prospects drear, and forward, though I cannot see, I guess and fear.
That funny itself is the culture that's Scottish.
Yeah.
Get it right. So, while Margaret's getting ready, this is another James Hogg Beethoven collaboration, so to speak. James Hogg was a poet in Scotland who wrote a whole book of songs, and Beethoven set a number of them to music. He was of the Burns camp. And though I can't endorse the sentiments of this song, I am happy that the author properly used the subjunctive mood.
Could this ill world have been contrived to stand without that mischief woman? How peaceful bodies would have life released frae all the ills they common. But since it is the woeful case that man must have this teasing crony, why such a sweet bewitching face? Oh, would they no been made sae bonny? I might have roamed with cheerful mind, nae sin nor sorrow to betide me, as careless as the wandering wind, as happy as the lamb beside me. I might have screwed my tuneful pegs and caroled mountain airs full gaily, had we but wanted all the megs with glossy insects saw the danger, feared the dark, the smile, the air, an essay taking. Yet open laid my wearless heart and got the wound that keeps me waking. My harp waves on the willow green of wild witch notes it has neone. Since ere I saw that pocky queen, say sweet, say wicked, and say bonny.
Okay, Diane, another tenor.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Stick 'em on. Yeah.
This is my favorite Burns poem, A Red, Red Rose. And I guess it's because it speaks of love and as being immortal. So I will read to you. Oh, my love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love is like the melody that's sweetly played in tune. So fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I, and I will love thee still, my dear, till all the seas gone dry. Till all the seas gone dry, my dear, and the rocks melt in the sun. I will love thee still, my dear, while the sands of love shall run. And fare thee will, my only love, and fare thee will a while, and I will come again, my love, though it were 10,000 miles.
densely revel may survey our rustic dance with scorn. But are their thoughts as light as ours beneath the milk-white thorn? The shepherd in the flowery glen in shepherd's phrase will woo. The courtier tells a finer tale, but is his heart as true? These wildwood flowers I put to death, that spotless breast of thine. The courtier's gems may witness love, but 'tis not love like mine.
Just a sort of quick announcement, the dessert that was handed out does have alcohol in it. If anyone does not want alcohol, I have an alcohol-free one. So, just to warn y'all.
I'll take it.
Okay?
You have what?
No, shortbread.
Right. Come on. Yes, and so is Renee.
Okay, good.
How's that? Elliot, get me some of for whatever it is. Yes.
Here, you have a plate.
We can rehearse it. Well, we can play it once. I can play it once while we.
Just eat. Don't worry about singing for the moment.
It has to be 4 times, so you start, you have that sign.
When we do this, there's going to be a little musical interlude interspersed where you normally think you should just keep singing, and so just be on your toes. We'll direct you.
This will conclude our our evening, and this is the traditional song that concludes all Burns events. So I want to thank you all for coming.
And thank you for coming from California. You ready? Okay.
We should stand for this.
We should stand. So this is actually Beethoven's setting, and so he interspersed it a little bit from what you're used to. So they're going to do a introduction, 8 measures or something, and then Margaret's going to point to sing.
There's a 2-measure interlude between verses. Or anyway, we'll let you know.
Give us
when
a
you're
cue.
done.
It's between the verses and the chorus. Between the verses and the chorus for all lengths of it. But we'll get you there.